A very good evening to you and welcome to yet another edition of Face the Nation. President Maithripala Sirisena, who concluded a visit to the United Nations General Assembly in New York, returned to the island this evening, and he is currently holding a press conference. You could watch the live footage of the press conference on Citizen TV as well as Shakti TV. Now, this week has been quite eventful. We saw on Monday negotiations began on the US-sponsored resolution on Sri Lanka, and last evening 25 more countries co-sponsored the US resolution in question, and now the US-sponsored resolution is adopted. What are the contents of this particular resolution in question? We saw the previous regime opposing the resolution on many occasions since 2011, and then we saw the present regime taking a complete U-turn in its foreign policy and then co-sponsoring the US-sponsored resolution itself. Now, what are the contents of this resolution in question? What sort of impact will Sri Lankans have to face in the future? We are all aware the 33rd sessions, that is next year September, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights will give an oral update. And 2017 March, a written update would be given by the High Commission for Human Rights. What sort of impact will it create? And what is the way forward for a country like Sri Lanka? To discuss all this and more, we have with us four special guests who are experts on the subject. Dr. Pakiswara Saramuthu, Executive Director of the Center for Policy Alternatives, who needs no introduction to the show. He's been on the show on many occasions as well. And then we have with us Mr. Kirti Tendakon, Executive Director of CAFE. He has been on the show as well on a previous occasion. And then we have Mr. Cornel Pereira, businessman and entrepreneur, to give us his views on the resolution and what sort of impact it will create on ordinary Sri Lankans. And then we have the former president of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, Mr. Upul Jayasuriya, who has also joined us on our show on a previous occasion as well. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us this evening. Let's start off with Dr. Saramuthu. Contents of this resolution and the impact on Sri Lanka. The time starts now.
Well, the first thing that has to be said is that this is a resolution in the United Nations Human Rights Council, and therefore this resolution is in no ways mandatory. Of course, if the resolution is not implemented, individual countries can take whatever decision they want with regard to that, but it's not mandatory. The second point with regard to the resolution is that it's historic because this is the first time that Sri Lanka has co-sponsored this resolution, and the resolution commends the government for various steps that it has taken since coming into office from January onwards. I think the key component with regard to the resolution, the one around which the debate will revolve, is that portion of the resolution which calls upon the government of Sri Lanka in terms of the accountability process that it says that it will put into action, to call upon them to take international foreign judges into the accountability panel, to take prosecutors as well, so that there will be not an exclusively domestic accountability process, but it will involve internationals as well. In addition to that, the resolution takes note of the Office of the High Commissioner's report on terms of the investigation on war crimes in Sri Lanka, and points out that there will probably have to be changes in terms of the Sri Lankan domestic legal framework to take into account war crimes and crimes against humanity. I think those are the two major issues around which the debate will revolve, and the arguments have been made that this is in some way an infringement on the sovereignty of the country, and that we have sold out in some way to international pressure and conspiracies and all of that. But the issue, I think, at the end of the day here is a commitment on the part of the government of Sri Lanka to have an accountability process and to do whatever is necessary to demonstrate sincere commitment and effective action with regard to this accountability process. And if there is a requirement for assistance from outside, not just in terms of technical resources, but also in terms of resource persons to be actively engaged in that process, then the government of Sri Lanka seems to be open to that. And one last point with regard to it is that at the end of the day, whatever happens with regard to a judicial process, with regard to setting up a special court, with regard to setting up a special counsel's office, whether there are going to be changes in the law, whether there are going to be international judges from the Commonwealth or wherever else, the Supreme Court of this country has the last, final, definitive say with regard to what is permissible, what can be permitted, and what cannot be permitted. There is nothing in this resolution which in any way dislodges the supremacy of that court in respect to anything to do with the legal framework of this country.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pakiso Saramuthu, Executive Director of the Center for Policy Alternatives. I now move on to Mr. Kirti Tennakone, Executive Director of the Campaign for a Free and Fair Elections. Now, Dr. Saramuthu said that this particular report, the resolution in question, is not mandatory. Why must the Sri Lankan government be concerned about it if this is the case? Your time starts now.
Why Sri Lanka should concern about this report is that the report, the facts, the report created is very clearly are the demands which are coming from Sri Lanka. For last 10 to 12 years, we have seen that various demands are coming from various stakeholders. The citizens of Sri Lanka, the organizations, civil society, politicians, various stakeholders who was looking for the justice, who was looking for the truth, who was looking for good governance, who was looking for justice, has raised various questions in related to the media freedom, the human rights, or missing people, the deaths, arbitrary assault, arresting of people, and various sort of issues was highlighted. And this report, the Geneva report, was comprehensive report based on the issues the citizens of Sri Lanka has raised during the last 10 to 12 years. And with that thing, there's no other way Sri Lanka can go forward when we are considering about justice, or when we are thinking of reconciliation. Ignoring these factors, we need the very basic human rights to restore in Sri Lanka. On the other hand, we are having a very big problem with our judiciary system, and the credibility of the judiciary system has gone now. And in the same time, we are having issues related to the implementation of good governance, and all these issues come into the light with the Geneva report. In the other hand, we must show that as a country, Sri Lanka is ready to go forward. In the meantime, facing the ground realities, what happened during the wartime. And if we are not ready to listen to the truth, there's no way we can go forward and go for the reconciliation effects. So in this scenario, Geneva report is very important, and in the same time, Sri Lankan government in a huge way had a political victory in their side, basically co-sponsoring the report, the resolution, and in the same time, there's no mandatory, as Sarah said very correctly, is coming out of this report. Sri Lanka can work on its own way, and in the same time, even the financial assistance can get on these activities to be done. And with that thing, I think this is a very golden opportunity we can go forward and look for the real reconciliation effort, and we can dig out the truth, and we will face as a nation to the future challenges of the reconciliation issues.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tennakone, Executive Director of the Campaign for a Free and Fair Election. I now move on to Mr. Upul Jayasuriya, who was the former president of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka. Mr. Jayasuriya, we saw the former president, Mahinda Rajapaksa, issuing a statement, requested the government to reject the US-sponsored resolution. In your opinion, do you think that the US-sponsored resolution that was adopted at the UN in Geneva yesterday infringes the sovereignty of this island nation? The time starts now.
And your question is twofold. The first part of the question is the statement that has been made by the former president MP Mahinda Rajapaksa to reject the US-sponsored resolution in Geneva. Now, I wish that he read the whole resolution in full and then tries to understand what's written there. And if one goes through it very carefully, we will see that it praises Sri Lanka. Every para by para by para, it praises Sri Lanka for what has happened since the dawn of a new era in January this year. The reconciliation process and the judicial process, the rule of law, restoration, the end of an era with regard to disappearances, and the people being treated with equal footing, the people whose lands were being plundered by the forces of the state have been returned back to the original owners, and most of these paras, majority of these paras are praising Sri Lanka for what it has done during this short period of the first 100 days and now 200 days. So that's a huge achievement for a country like Sri Lanka, which we have a few other issues to be put right, considering the fact that we have lost the GSP Plus, we have lost the EU ban, EU has imposed a ban with regard to the purchase of fish from Sri Lanka. So these are huge economic blows. GSP Plus has resulted in a situation where we had earlier we started with $4 billion of garment exports. Now, after about nearly 20 years, we are still exporting 4 billion. But Vietnam, that started with 4 billion about more than a decade ago, has now ended up with 23 billion. So these are the direct impact that we have suffered and the people of this country have suffered. So with regard to the second part of the question that you said about the judicial process, whether the Sri Lankan judiciary has been undermined. No. Sri Lankan judiciary...
Will it infringe the sovereignty of the country?
The sovereignty of the country is also based based from the fact that we are now being invited to get the assistance from the international judges and the observers. Look at the Sri Lankan courts. The lawyers in Sri Lanka, we always quote judgments from the Supreme Court of other countries, the Privy Councils and whatever the juries have said in different contexts in different countries. It's a global village that we have. We are not quoting only the Sri Lankan judgments. Look at the Sri Lankan judgments themselves. How many times, every time it's referring to the outside jurisdictions. What did we ask during the time when Dr. Shinani Bandaranaike was impeached? We asked international judges, Commonwealth judges be brought into this country. The entire legal community in one voice asked for this. But why are we now getting scared or even having different thought as to why we should go back or try to project something like a draconian kind of a situation when there is some kind of a discussion with regard to international judges? We welcome them most. We have created some international judges like Justice Veeramantri. He presided the World Court. Justice Mark Fernando, he was very much of a respected judge. We have the legal arena, the judiciary is one world. It's one world. There's nothing to get scared about it. These are the people who are trying to divide the country with unwanted kind of basic arguments which will not be accepted or upheld by the intelligence.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pusarya, the former president of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka. I now move on to Mr. Cornel Pereira, a businessman and entrepreneur. Just to give us a brief introduction about Mr. Pereira. Mr. Pereira was instrumental in bringing the supermarket complex to Sri Lanka, the concept to Sri Lanka in the 1970s, the late 1970s, and also was the founder of the Hilton Colombo as well. He has been quite instrumental with regard to what has happened in the past on the open economy in the island during Mr. J.R. Jayawardena's era. Mr. Cornel Pereira, what do you gather from the US-sponsored resolution on Sri Lanka as a layman, not as a professional but as a layman?
As a layman and also as a businessman, I can see the change is focused and moving towards a solution, conflict resolution. Why that change? If I can go back a little, as a businessman, the international community, apart from this Geneva thing, was very keen to see a change in this country. So this is not limited to the war activities. after the war 2009, there were lots of things that the international community was able to see as authoritarian, dictatorial, defiant, and becoming hostile to countries that were traditionally, conventionally friends with us. These things really added up to that feeling of, there was a feeling, we can't deny it, in the Geneva thing, that we should go hard on Sri Lanka. Now, the change came. We worked for it, the change came, and we delivered the change. Who delivered the change? This government. President, Prime Minister, the UNP and others delivered this change on the 8th of January. With the change, the mindset of all these people changed. Why? It is a payback. We delivered the change. The whole international community, except for one or two, wanted the change for in their own interests. In their own interests, if you put it into colloquial language, okay, we got to show something here. And that was the feeling behind in the international community. They were never out to really punish us, but because of the ending of the hostility by the President, the Prime Minister and the people in general, their thoughts about Sri Lanka changed. Here is the time, and never ever mentioned, they can't do it geopolitically, globally, to say, yes, we are happy you brought the change. And we did them this favor of bringing about the change. They owe us one. What is it? This Geneva thing, I don't go into technical legalities and so on. I think they are in the right spirit, like Mr. Doctor said here, and they are positive. They are not here now, this time around, to pin anyone down. There is no punitive mindset in the resolution. There is no punitive mindset. But we have to look at it like, then what? We, on our own, must show that this issue was nothing so bad as anywhere else in the world. I came into this program because I happened to see in the newspapers.
I'll give 10 seconds to wrap up.
Japan to send special prosecutor to Sri Lanka. Noguchi, the former international judge of Cameroon, so on and so forth. We all know about Pol Pot. Set up into. He's coming here. He's the guy, one of them, gentlemen, who was on that Cambodian thing. Are we anyway even remotely close to that?
Thank you very much, Mr. Pereira.
One more sentence, sir. Mr. Rajapaksa won with the ballot. We had a democratic system. It was an internal war. Pol Pot is different. I'm not saying they're pushing this, but we must not be looked at like that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pereira, for joining us this evening and speaking on the US-sponsored resolution on Sri Lanka. Let me introduce our journalist this evening, Nadine Majid. Nice to have you on board as usual. Sonali Vanikabadge, good evening and welcome to the show as usual. And then Faraz Shaukat Ali was absent during the last 2 weeks, was in London. I'm not going to ask you what you were doing in London, Faraz, but I'm looking forward for questions this evening as well. So I'll leave it to the journalist to pose the questions to our guests.
Do you mind if I go first? Dr. Saramuthu and also Mr. Jayasuriya and also Mr. Tennakoon as well, I'd like one of you to answer this question. I'm going to put it in context. Recently in Sri Lanka we saw the entire country was gripped by this brutal murder of a 5-year-old girl in Kotadeneyawa, the Seya Sadewumi murder. We've seen in the aftermath of that people calling for the death penalty, for strict, stringent punishment. And also in the meantime, in the recent past, we've come to hear allegations against the police themselves, how they acted with regard to 2 of the suspects. We're hearing allegations that a 17-year-old schoolboy was taken into custody, was allegedly beaten up by the police, was allegedly stripped and taken photos of in the nude. My question is this: In a country such as this, where there are such allegations against the guardians of the law, can we expect a domestic mechanism to work?
Well, this point has been made a number of times even before the reportage in respect of child abuse came to light, that if there is to be a credible accountability mechanism, it cannot be exclusively domestic. Precisely because the agents of the state who would be involved in that accountability mechanism are also accused of being part of these atrocities and crimes. Yeah. So we do have a very serious problem here, in that the record of law enforcement, the record with regard to the judicial process, is extremely wanting. It doesn't inspire confidence. It doesn't inspire any kind of trust or faith. And if you're going to do a process of reconciliation and accountability, I would think that primarily it has to be victim-centered. You have to look at it from the perspective of the victims. You have to look at it from the perspective of, at the end of the day, we want to establish institutions, processes, and a culture of good governance, accountability, and transparency, and we need it in order to be able to have meaningful reconciliation and national unity.
Dr. Sarmuth, my problem is this though, the incident with this boy, murder suspect or otherwise, it really can't be viewed as an isolated incident, can it? Because we have seen such allegations being leveled against the police before, police high-handedness. Any kind of mechanism that is implemented in Sri Lanka, whether even if there are consultants, if, as the allegations say, such behavior in the police is widespread, won't there be resistance to such a mechanism moving forward? So shouldn't the focus be on cleaning up the police force before you actually implement your investigative mechanism?
Well, I think no one will deny that, as you say, cleaning up the police force has got to be on the agenda of any government that is talking about good governance and talking about accountability. But that might take a lot of time. And therefore, I think the assumption is that the changed political context would have also rubbed off on the agents of law and order as well. And that is why, to make assurance doubly sure, as it were, the argument is being made about a special counsel's office, a separate court, which could involve internationals as well. So there is that sort of fallback option to ensure that if it is seen to be lacking in credibility and legitimacy, if it is entirely domestic, that there is this fallback option. At the same time, of course, it's very important to make sure that we make the right choices with regard to the internationals who will be part of any kind of accountability mechanism.
Mr. Jayasuriya, as the former president of the bar, what do you have to say?
Yes, I would like to add on to that. Now you are asking about the domestic process. Can people have trust and confidence in the domestic process with a police force like this? I'll say something more to that. About 2 days back, there was an incident where a young child of 16 years was taken into custody for having slapped another peer of his of the same age in a leading school in Colombo. Apparently, the father of the other child who got hammered is a judge. Now, the child who dealt the blow, the slap, was taken into custody and they produced in court. And another judge, probably a brother judge, admonished him and they said, would you like to go and stay with the drug addicts in the remand prison? And then he was remanded. The 16-year-old boy. And then did not stop with that. It was a situation where after he was bailed out, he was told that he should report to the police every morning before he goes to the school. Now with this kind of judges, if they are not put in the right place, can we have any confidence? Now I, as the president of the Bar Association, had the occasion to make speeches at the ceremonial court in the Supreme Court, welcoming judges. I did not welcome some judges. I did not make a mistake. But some judges, I put it right, and I said, those who do not have a right legitimately, they cringe and scrounge for appointments that do not legitimately belong to them. have ascended the Supreme Court. I told them in their own presence. Now, these are the judges. One judge is now charged with rape or attempted rape. Another judge is there is serious accusation with regard to corruption. Another judge, the most unsuitable person. We are talking about the apex court of this country. Can we seriously ask not only the Sri Lankans but even the internationals or even the locals, can we ask people to have some trust in this whole system until we clear this backlog and they put it right? Something has to be done about this. So in this kind of situation, we can't have any trust in the system that we have.
Taking into account what you're saying right now, a domestic mechanism in Sri Lanka with regard to looking into the past wrongdoings, with regard to the war that took place in Sri Lanka, would it be successful?
This is what I was addressing yourself. Now, in that kind of a situation, take the case when there was a judgment passed, there was an order made with regard to the former Chief Justice Dr. Shirani Bandaranaike from the Supreme Court, or from the Court of Appeals. The presiding judge of that bench was Justice Sriskanta Raja. What happened to him? He issued a writ preventing her being removed from office. He was never appointed to he was overlooked on 5 occasions. And as a result of that, he suffered a stroke and he died while in office. These are situations that we have gone through in Sri Lanka. So the judges have been compelled. The foreigners do not know whether the system, we are very happy and proud that the system has been put right. But some of those people who were unduly appointed to this apex court are still holding office. So in that kind of a situation, we can't instill confidence.
Is this government, the present government, taking a genuine interest to address accountability issues through a domestic mechanism? Do you see that happening?
When you say a domestic process, as a lawyer, I would say, I'm not representing the Bar Association, it is important, whatever the process that you have, that should be a process that could instill confidence in the society, not only local but also international. Otherwise, it's not going to have any kind of a purpose. We are a battered system of judiciary and a legal profession that we have gone through. We have gone through many obstacles. We have now come to a stage where we cannot relax, but we can be happy about the situation that has been created. But that's not the end of the journey. This situation, even if you have a domestic process, we can't instill confidence. If we can't instill confidence, then it's a write-off. That is why I say, I kept on saying, even when I was holding the president of the Bar Association, we wanted the Commonwealth judges, foreign judges, to come and sit, go through the impeachment process. If there has been any guilt of Dr. Shirani Bandaranaike, or for that matter any other judge, we wanted this process incorporated into the Constitution, the impeachment process. Why? We did not have confidence in the domestic process.
Mr. Tenneco, with regard to repealing the Prevention of Terrorism Act, this was one of the concerns in the US-sponsored resolution to relook at repealing the Prevention of Terrorism Act. We are quite aware that over 200 individuals are in remand custody now.
273.
73, and then we have approximately 196 only we know. Yeah. Those individuals who have been identified who have been in remand custody on the Prevention of Terrorism Act. How important is it to repeal the Prevention of Terrorism Act?
I mean,
and giving some sort of closure.
PTA has not prevented two insurgencies in Sri Lanka. And when it was first introduced in 1978, if my memory is correct, and then within no time the LTT in the northern insurgency took place, and it was not able to prevent it. In the other hand, the JVPs had the uprising, and this PTA was continuously used to torture, to disappear people, to keep them under the custody, not letting even the lawyers to visit them, to not letting the political party representatives to look into them. And there was so much. If we are looking for torture-free Sri Lanka, I mean, we have to get rid of PTA. And still, we know that there are something like 273 plus people in detention under PTA. Now the war is over, the terrorist has eliminated, and why this particular law, which was a total violation of human rights when it comes to the freedom of expression, freedom of association, and it was a tool continuously used to torture people, and we have to get rid of. And this is a demand.
But the PTA was not repealed even after new government is elected on the 8th of January.
I mean, we are talking about this repealing the PTA for almost 20 years. And just after the war, we took it, and the CPA had conference tables and, you know, table reports on this. And if my memory is correct, we first wrote the first petition in 1996 about this, when some media institutions were taken hostage, you know, using the PTA. Here the issue, still these issues has to be sorted out. PTA is not the way forward, and this is the demand which is coming inside Sri Lanka, and it has gone to Geneva now. It has once again came on the report. So still, if we are looking for something, you know, unique, justice, and if we are looking for the restore the human rights situation in Sri Lanka, this is the right time to use these elements.
Mr. Tenneco, is it enough to just
PTA?
repeal the PTA? Don't you have to? Doesn't there have to be action taken against? I mean, it says you can repeal an act, but at the same time, you're not changing any of the people inside these agencies, like the police force, for example. So these people who you say may have been responsible for torture using the Prevention of Terrorism Act. So shouldn't there be prosecutions? I mean, we keep talking about accountability for crimes that may have occurred in the final stage of the war. What about accountability for things that are happening here and now in the country?
Okay.
Right now.
The issue with the PTA is not just keeping the people under custody, and it is the issue of the basic human rights when it comes to the freedom of association, freedom of expression, and the detention. For us, PTAs, whatever the people keeping under the PTA is a illegal detention, because the basic human rights are not prevented with that particular person. And in the other hand, when it comes to the accountability issue, we are having a very serious threat with this, because when we are, you know, look into the very basic practices of the PTA. For example, one person has kept almost 18 years under detention, and there was 4 people kept for almost 15 years under PTA, and keeping a person under detention for almost more than 12 years, maybe 1/6 of his lifetime. How can you justify that?
Sonali?
Mr. Upuljoy Surya, now earlier on in his opening statements, Mr. Keith Tenneco said the credibility of the judicial system has gone. Are you in complete agreement of this? Or, as you mentioned, Sri Lanka has produced some world-class judges such as C.J. Veeramandri, Justice Mark Fernando. However, there are those other examples that you brought out as well. How does the public begin to have faith in the legal system and in law enforcement authorities? How does this process begin once again?
Yes, thank you. It's not the credibility of the judiciary that has gone away. The issue has been certain miscreants who have been unduly appointed to these appointments in the apex court. They have not conducted themselves in keeping with the age-old traditions and maintaining the dignity that it deserves.
But what about the magistrates, the young lawyers who become magistrates and then go on to become district judges, high court judges, etc.? Should there be training programs conducted regularly? Are they being conducted at present, or is that training not?
There is the judicial training college is there. They have been trained there. In the meantime, I must say that the rot that set into the entire judiciary happened during the time of one particular CJ, Justice Sarathan Silva, because he was using the judges for to serve his own
Mr. Asur, I would appreciate if you could take responsibility for
these are commonly known thing, because there were 2 impeachment motions that were placed before the Parliament order paper against Justice Saraswila. These are public documents. So I'm not saying that something new about it, because people were so accustomed to this kind of allegation. And none of those allegations were gone into. Put that away for the moment. So what happens is some of those judges who were used with an ulterior motive have sometimes, some of them have also become senior now. So some kind of cleansing is necessary. We have urged from time to time that the Judicial Service Commission takes a more serious view about their conduct, and then there should be some prompt action that should be taken in such situations. These are not matters that we should talk in public. I don't like to talk about these matters in public, but as a lawyer, there is a question that is being posed by the public also. So we have to answer this question with some circumspect, but we still have to maintain the dignity of the judiciary. We can't make it worse than what it is, or rather it can't be worse than what it is.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jayasuriya. So just a quick question to Mr. Colonel Pereira. Mr. Colonel Pereira, businessmen shied away from investing in Sri Lanka during the previous regime with regard to the human rights and accountability issues in the country. Do you think that we have a conducive environment now for foreign investors to come in Sri Lanka and invest?
You mean now with this new
present
setup?
Juncture, that's right.
I can link this to the judicial system. They still have concerns because there are land laws which are changed 6 months, 1 year. And there is this beautiful euphemism called expropriation. Expropriation, in the minds of people who have come here and who want to come here, simply means nationalization. And this government very clearly, even before the elections in December, very clearly the candidate stated, as soon as we come, we will kill this. As soon as we come, we'll do justice to this. And what was that expropriation? In one day, 33 companies, including Mr. Dayagamage Sugar, My Hilton Hotel, they were all taken over and became state property. Now, in this kind of situation, I'll give you a very good example. You have to know this and take it to the public. When this happens, from the time it happened, we have all heard about Shangri-La Hotel. Shangri-La Hotel is a big chain. They came here 4 years ago. 4 years have passed. Have you seen one flow coming up? Because all investors, they network. They all know. They were waiting.
Do we have a conducive environment now for foreign investors to come in?
I think definitely the change. There is a sentiment change. Yes, now we don't have authoritarian rule. We have a very nice president. He's been accepted globally as a good human being, and there is no fears, different fears that people entertain. And they also know, oh, there is a chance, there is a budget coming, maybe in the budget they'll change it, because these things have all been pronounced many times before in places like this before the election. May you allow me to go one step for this judiciary business? The local people have no faith in the judiciary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pereira. I'll give you time on your fourth round. Let's move on to our third round now. We start off with Dr. Saranamuthu. Dr. Saranamuthu, whose victory is what we achieved in Geneva? Whose victory is it? Is it the people's victory, the president's victory, the prime minister's victory? Whose victory? How can you dub this?
As far as I'm concerned, it's a victory of all the people and individuals and factors that you mentioned. What we have here is the government of Sri Lanka saying that yes, there is a problem with regard to accountability. We are willing to work together with the international community to address it. We acknowledge that something needs to be done, and we are now committed to doing something about it. We are engaging in a process of transitional justice. We are talking about accountability. We are talking about a special counsel's office. We are talking about a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We are talking about a permanent office of the disappeared. This is historic. This is unprecedented. Now, the proof of the pudding, of course, is in the eating, and implementation is not going to be easy. There are a number of hurdles and obstacles in the way. But here you have the beginnings of a commitment. There is a requirement as a member of the international community that there be an oral update by the High Commissioner, as well as within an 18-month period, we're going to have a report on progress or lack of progress, as the case might be, in respect of all these commitments made. So it is a victory for all of us. At the end of the day, as the resolution itself notes, that we're willing to face the whole question of accountability, the question of crimes against humanity, allegations of crimes against humanity, war crimes, etc. It is going to restore the honor and integrity of the armed forces as well, because it will identify that certain individuals may well have been responsible for this, but it's not a blanket condemnation of the armed forces of the country. So there is so many positive outcomes that one can think of that could come out of this process.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saramuthu. I now move on to Mr. Conal Pereira. Ms. Conal Pereira, in your opening remarks, you said it's because of the change that took place in Sri Lanka on the 8th of January that the international community has been very close with the country. You said the credit should go to the President and the Prime Minister and the new government. However, speaking at a media briefing today, Minister Dilan Pereira from the Sri Lanka Freedom Party said, "We didn't achieve this victory at the United Nations because of Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe or Foreign Minister Mangala Samaraweera. It was because of President Maithripala Sirisena. We achieved the victory at the UN." How do you view this?
I think very simply joint effort. This is a JV, joint venture. The President, Prime Minister and Mr. Mangala, they're all in the same team. Some have visited some countries, others, nothing to do. That teamwork has worked, it is working, and the credit goes to all those three people. I know Mr. Mangala Samaraweera, as soon as the election was over, he was going all over the country to retrieve the relationships that we had. So did President Maithripala. I don't think we need explanations about that. He is a good human being, and that chemistry has rubbed off on all those people. He was at the table of President Obama. There was friendly conversation. His demeanor was great. He was full of smiles. And they all knew. That's exactly what I said. They were not waiting for Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, Mangala or President Maithripala. They wanted the change. The people didn't vote for them. They voted out the other regime.
So are we acting based on the whim of the international community? Is that what you're trying to say?
No. We voted them out.
Then?
We voted them out, not for the international community.
Who voted them out?
The people, Sri Lankan enterprise. Voting them out was a Sri Lankan enterprise. Fortunately, we had people all together, and we were looking for a common candidate. From somewhere came down this Mr. Maithripala Sirisena. That helped us. The JVP was wanting regime change. They never supported anyone, Tamils, everybody. So that was a Sri Lankan enterprise, but in doing that, simultaneously, we satisfied the craze and the wanting of the international community for a change here. You know that. Globally, there are other sensitivities.
You don't make sense right now, Mr. Pereira. Why must we satisfy the international community? Do you think that we satisfy the international community?
No, you're right. We didn't want to satisfy the international community. We did it for ourselves.
Right, thank you very much.
But it was a byproduct.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pereira. I now move on to Mr. Kirtan Nakon. Recently, your organization, CAFE, issued a statement saying that the Udulagama and the Paranagama Commission reports be made public. What are these reports? What are these commissions? Why now? Why do we need these commission reports to be made public?
Number one, this Maxwell Paranagama report and Udulagama committee was established by the former president, Mahinda Rajapaksa, to address two different mandates. Number one is the missing persons. There was, as everyone knows, that there were some missing people, varied numbers. The people it could go up to maybe 300,000. The 3,000 people, according to our statistics, maybe more than that for that matter. And these two presidential commissions were addressing the missing persons issues, and in the other thing, the Udulagam Commission was addressing the human rights issues. And there were various reports were published, interim reports, the full reports was published, and it was handed over to the former president. But we haven't seen, any one of us haven't seen the report. So only thing what we know is that there were submissions to these commissions. There were various people, the victims has gone to these commissions and they have given evidence to these commissions, and there was a very credible information logged in the papers, and there was systematic way of inquiry has taken place, and there's some documentation on this. So with all this documentation, we are so sure that if you are looking for justice, truth, this is the base documents which we can use as when we are searching for truth. And the prosecution, I mean, more than 60 cases, we are so sure about that all the evidence on the disappearances were filed and logged in. Just get that file and hand it over to the relevant people, so this mechanism can be started with a credible, starting from our own system. Then with these things, with these cases, we can test our system, the local present judiciary system in Sri Lanka, and then we can argue whether we know the international expertise on them. So this is the starting point, and we should have the report, and that will be the base document for the discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nakon, for that. I now move on to Mr. Upul Jayasuriya. Ms. Jayasuriya, what happened in Geneva? Sri Lanka co-sponsoring the US-sponsored resolution in question. Was this a strategic move, or was it taken due to the genuine interest of the people? Because we know China and Russia usually opposes any resolution that is being tabled at the United Nations High Commission for Human Rights in Geneva. And not co-sponsoring the resolution means that they will go for a vote. Did we take this decision to co-sponsor the resolution as a strategic move, or take into account the genuine interests of the people of Sri Lanka? Your time starts now.
It's a strategic move, and also not only the genuine interest, but also the international community headed by USA have decided by this time that they...
International community is not headed by the United States, is it?
This resolution.
Resolution in question, okay.
The resolution that was held by the USA have decided at a certain point of time, particularly after the 8th of January, that going through the transformation that Sri Lanka has gone through with regard to the judiciary, the rule of law, the accountability, the transparency, and the prevention of crime, that the government has made a genuine effort in restoring the glory that we once enjoyed in the history. So in doing so, they have taken a decision to maintain our dignity of our country, and then in discussion with Sri Lanka, the government of Sri Lanka, they have decided to bring this forward, not against the government of Sri Lanka, but with the government of Sri Lanka. That is why the major part of this resolution is a commendation of what the government has done during this short period of time. That has to be noted. And also, this is a situation where nearly 25 countries, as it happened to be the last time, were against Sri Lanka. They all supported against Sri Lanka the motion, including India. They have been our friend for such decades, the closest neighbor. They went against us. Look at the situation, the transformation. The first trip, the first dignitary that visited Sri Lanka soon after the election was the Honorable the Prime Minister of India. Now then the visits that were made by the other dignitaries, and all that signifies the respect and the regard and the restoration of the dignity that we once enjoyed as a nation, Sri Lanka. So this was such a welcome situation, having gone through all the setbacks with regard to our international relations. So, as a result of that, now we are in a situation, they are now telling us, you tell us whatever you want from us. We are happy and confident with what you have in mind. We are happy and confident with what you are trying to do. So we'll help you in every way that's possible. Maybe the international observers, the international prosecutors, the international whatever the other support. In everything that we do, can our economy sustain without the international support? For everything that we do, we want the international support.
Thank you very much.
But only for the judicial process, if we say, no, we don't want you guys here, I mean, that's a laughing matter.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jayashree. We're now going for the fourth round. Let's start off with Faraz.
Thank you, Shamil. This question's to you, Mr. Pereira. As a serial entrepreneur, you must be the one to answer this. We've spoken today about trust, about the credibility gone and so on. So how does the business community view plans to have retrospective taxes?
The business community locally?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, there are expectations that with the budget, a lot of things will be made investor friendly.
But how can they be investor friendly when the government announces a super gain tax and this tax and that tax? They're all one-offs.
Yes.
At the time, it sounds to me like a little bit like Nazism, you know?
Okay.
How do you cope?
I will tell you this. Yes, we all work for the change. The change was delivered. People's expectations still undelivered. I think this covers one part of it. Still, people, including businessmen, the hybrid government did not happen. Our expected hybrid government did not happen. That was the expectation of the people. And can we blame the government? Can we blame the government?
So,
no.
are you saying, Mr. Pereira, that all these one-off taxes, all of a sudden taxes, is the price the business community has to pay for the change that was achieved in January?
No, I wouldn't put it that way. But let me go one or two steps further. Economy has slowed down. Not that the government wanted it to slow down. It has slowed down. The rupee has weakened. We can't deny that. Now, all these things happen. Why? Because the government hasn't settled down. There is no stability. Everyone is what? Self-defense. First, I can say openly, I don't think the politicians, the leaders that I mentioned, the joint venture and so on, still feel comfortable about the stability and the ability of the government to have a two-thirds majority to run this country. That is in question. But can they be blamed? Because their focus, second focus was, what they promised was hybrid government. But how can you do a hybrid government if you are not sure of a two-thirds majority that is absolutely necessary to bring about the changes? Because the lawmakers, members of parliament, their first primary fiduciary duty is to pass laws. And what are the laws that people are expecting? And the government itself is expecting. You can't jump parties. You have to have punishment for these other things that you mentioned, human rights violations, so on and so forth. And to move forward, it is still not possible unless they had to fall in line with coalition compulsions. This government had to do it. Therefore, they have also brought in, I worked for the campaign for clean and competent candidates. That was not achieved. But in these circumstances, people have to look for other means in business. How do I cover this? How do I cover this? It may be unpalatable. They're not doing it happily.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pereira. I would urge the journalists to keep their questions based on Geneva, because it's important to give individuals who are watching this program some sort of closure as to what took place in Geneva as well. Nadim?
Thanks. We were talking about the police force. I think what I wanted to bring out here was, for example, the police force or the military or in law enforcement agencies, in security agencies, Is there enough, or even in the judiciary, is there enough of a screening process? Are the internal structures strong enough in Sri Lanka to carry out or implement a domestic mechanism? For example, I have not heard if, I should probably go look it up, but does our police service have an internal affairs department that keeps an eye on what police officers are up to?
Dr. Saramutu?
You see, I think the issue here is this, is that the police department has its internal controls and all of that. You have, when the 17th Amendment was operational and now that the 19th Amendment has brought it back in, you will have a National Police Commission. The issue here is not that the department in itself cannot function properly. The issue is the politicization, the external intervention of political actors to undermine the credibility and integrity of the force by getting them to do things on their behalf, by restricting the space that is legitimately there for these officers to perform their duties as intended. And that's what we have to combat, whether it be the police force or whether it's bribery and corruption or whatever it is. The independent institutions of the state must not be allowed to become pawns and puppets of government. There is a distinction between state and government.
What about individual officers themselves? I mean, politicization generally affects officers who hold rank, the SSPs, the ASPs. I'm talking about individual officers. For example, Dr. Saramutu or even Mr. Jayasuriya, when you're going on the road and you're flagged down by a police officer, are you able to trust that police officer, that constable or sergeant or whoever it is?
Yeah, so we have to move towards a situation in which there is a police service in this country where that corporal or officer or whatever on the road is not going to be thinking about as to whether the person he has stopped, he can get a bribe from them, or that this person is someone powerful and influential, and if he does something, he's going to have a punitive transfer or something like that. No, we have to create the space for the institutions to function as they are intended. Without that, of course, we are doomed. If we allow the space for partisan politicization, for governments to be nobbling the police service and the other institutions of law and order, there is no rule of law.
Mr. Jayasuriya?
Yes, I would add on to what Dr. Saramutu was saying. Now, due to this entire politicization process of the police force, you may recall during the time of the election, I took up strong issues. One was we published an advertisement in the papers asking all police officers of all ranks and also all the service personnel to abide by the law and to disregard the illegal orders that may be directed to those officers, and assured them of legal assistance and whatever the assistance that we could provide as lawyers to safeguard their rights and interests. And also, another instance, I had to go to the extreme instance of threatening the IGP that I would treat him as a coward under Section 55 of the Police Ordinance if he failed to take action as required under the law. Because the entire police force and the good governance and these principles have crumbled around us. So we had to take this out of the box.
Let me put this another way. Do you think that the, just one question, do you think that the individual police officer...
No, please, I want to focus this discussion today solely on Geneva. I don't want to deviate from our core area today.
To do with but Geneva, the institutions that are going to implement what happened in
Mr. Jayasuriya, did the international community dislike the previous regime, the Mahinda Rajapaksa regime? Is that why they changed or somewhat had a soft corner towards this particular regime and had a resolution on board?
It is not that they loved him less, the person called Mahinda Rajapaksa. Look at the situation where there was an instance during the time of the war, 3 foreign ministers of UK, France and Germany visited Sri Lanka. How were they treated? They had to be treated with some kind of dignity. They were asked to come to Ambalipitia, and then the President Rajapaksa was sitting under a mango tree, and they called some boy to bring 3 chairs and they got them to sit there. until the boy brought the 3 chairs, the 3 foreign ministers of these 3 powerful nations were standing and looking on. Now, this is what he created. This is what they did not like. This is how he demolished the diplomatic relations that we had built up over the years and decades with the foreign countries. So, it's not that they disliked a person. They disliked his mannerism and the statesmanship and the manner in which he conducted the government and the absence of the rule of law and all the democratic principles that he did not respect. That's what he created for himself and the country.
Mr. Tennekoon, is the present regime too busy satisfying the international community and forgetting their core responsibility here in Sri Lanka?
I'll like to answer it in a different way. I mean, prevention of these sort of human rights violations which took place during the last 15 years is something to be, if we are looking for real reconciliation, there must be a proper mechanism to ensure that what happened in the last 15 years will not repeat again. So when you are going for the rule of law, for sure you have to think of the systems to work with the police department or even with the military and all that. The prevention of human rights violation is a must. So there must be some internal controls within the military, within paramilitary organizations, and in the other time, I mean, with the police. So if the present government is ready to accommodate that sort of initiatives, and if they are truly willing to do that part of business, then definitely we are happy as Sri Lankans. In the same time, that's something make the international community happy. In the other hand, when the human rights violations are taking place in a country, the other countries cannot ignore it. For example, even India cannot do it. If they are having some interest in Sri Lanka, for their, in the other hand, the pressure mounting from the southern India for that matter, Tamil Nadu. In the other hand, there are so many people living in diaspora in the western countries, the pressure mounts on the other countries. So they have to look into that interest also. So in the other hand, in the global context, we should understand if a human rights violation is taking place in a country, then it is becoming a global issue. And global issues has to be treated as global issues.
Sonali?
Mr. Jayasuriya, my next question is to you. Yesterday, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe has said that new legislative measures will be brought in, of course, under the framework of the Constitution of Sri Lanka. Now, will these new legislative measures have retrospective effect to sort of tackle the situations that or the incidents or the crimes that took place or were alleged to have taken place before the enactment of the legislation?
No, I think I'm not exactly sure about the statement that you are quoting from the Honourable Prime Minister. But this would be, if at all, with regard to the procedure, the judicial procedure that would be adopted, not creating new offences and adding them onto the law book. The offences that are there are the common offences that are there in the penal code that have been there for more than 100 years. So there is no, have no fear about that. That will remain to be the same. It has not been amended for more than 100 years. So these are sometimes in procedural matters. Now there was this question raised about this, the child's murder. The rape and the murder of the small child of 6 years of age. There again, something can be done now, not that has no retrospective effect as such, but when the procedure is put right, the procedure that would be adopted in such judicial proceedings will be that. Now, I would, as a lawyer, propose that that kind of offences should be taken for trial in the High Court by indictment and concluded within a period of at least 6 months' time. Concluded. And there shall be no suspended sentences, and the death penalty should be imposed firstly on such offences. It should be done away, then only the deterrent that will come. So some of these cosmetic effects have to be brought in, without which we can't instill the confidence of the public in the system that we have.
Dr. Saranamuthu, with regard to what took place in Geneva, do you think this is the right way out for Sri Lanka in terms of satisfying the international demands on accountability and human rights?
See, what took place in Geneva was the government of Sri Lanka acknowledging that something had to be done, stating quite clearly that it was willing to work with the international community to do something. So it is a commitment to work with international support. What better option is there at the end of the day? We need that assistance. We need to re-establish diplomatic relations with the community of nations. We need to strengthen human rights protection in this country, reverse the culture of impunity, deal with accountability. For me, it's a win-win situation on all fronts, and I'm waiting to see how it's going to be implemented.
Dr. Saramuthu, we saw in March this year, Foreign Minister Mangal Samaraweera pledging that a domestic mechanism will be introduced in Sri Lanka within a couple of months. However, come September this year, we still didn't see a domestic mechanism. Do you see genuine interest taken by the present regime to address accountability issues?
Yes, I do. I mean, when Mangala Samaraweera spoke about it as Foreign Minister in March, there was an election yet to happen. It was supposed to be happening, the Parliament was supposed to be dissolved in 100 days, and then that didn't happen. He finally got it in August. So now let's see. I think the Foreign Minister has gone on record saying that there will be public consultation and discussion up to January, and that within 18 months, this mechanism will be operational. Let's make sure that it is.
If it's not mandatory, why must we respect this resolution?
Why must you look? The commitment made by the government of Sri Lanka in respect of setting up these institutions predates the resolution in Geneva. The Yahapalana platform talked about a credible domestic mechanism in respect of accountability. So this is not a response to Geneva or to the Office of Human Rights, the High Commissioner's the report. This is what this government believes needs to be done in order to achieve accountability, because accountability is pivotal to reconciliation and national unity. So this is not being done on the orders of the international community, however defined. We are at the end of the day doing this by ourselves, for ourselves.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saramuthu. We now move on to the final round of the show. Each speaker would get 1 minute to speak. Let's start off with Mr. Conal Pereira. What is the way forward for a country like Sri Lanka?
I think the way forward now is, all these gentlemen have mentioned that everything is supportive from the international community and Geneva for a settlement. We have to grab this and settle it, but this Geneva thing is given an opportunity for extremists and bankrupt politicians to again explode this. We have to think the government, President Sirisena, former President Mahinda Rajapaksa, how do we bring about a solution to this? As a businessman, I can tell you, former President Mahinda Rajapaksa deserves respect, recognition and reward. Because if you took your mind back to 2000, before the war was settled, every one of us, including myself, the only thing we said is, "Oon ekak karanna me yuddha ivara karala daanna." That's what he did. That's what he did. Rightly or wrongly, he had. And before that, fortunately, the UNP and Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe had weakened the LTT. He won this. He deserves credit for this. And it is the actions of his after the end of the war that earned for him the wrath and distrust. All what he did, that was bad. And that boosted up this.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. May I
yes.
Last sentence. I feel to resolve this, we have very simple 3-4 things. The people are all basically religious people. Reparations is an important thing for the people who suffered most. That must be priority. They must be looked after. We all know it. And then, if at all possible, we have to see where you can reward.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Pereira. I now move on to Dr. Pakisar Saramuthu. Do you agree with the statement made by Mr. Pereira?
No.
Do you agree with it? Your time starts now.
At the end of the day, well, that's probably their defense at the end of the day, that they did what was necessary to end the war, and now we have all of this on our plate. No, I don't agree that you can do anything in order to finish a war. But I think what's important now here is this, is that here is an opportunity to work with the international community to achieve accountability and recognize that accountability is absolutely pivotal to reconciliation and national unity. We have to seize this opportunity. There are going to be lots of challenges as far as implementation is concerned, and I hope that the key stakeholders involved are not going to look at this in terms of some kind of petty partisan, from a petty partisan perspective, but look at it in terms of what is required to heal this country, to create a decent society in this country, which is, I think, what we all desire and deserve at the end of the day.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pakisar Saramuthu. I now move on to Mr. Kirti Tennakoon. Next year, September, Sri Lanka is again going to be in the spotlight as far as United Nations Human Rights High Commission in Geneva is concerned. What sort of impact would this create on the ordinary citizens of Sri Lanka? The time starts now.
By next year, can every Sri Lankan be proud of that we know the real truth, nothing but the truth? And if we are ready to reform the judiciary and the other systems, which is mandatory to have a very good governance system, and are we ready to accept the fact we are lacking the human rights standards, the international standards, and we are going to work towards that? And if we are ready to accept the fact that the true reconciliation with a true spirit is needed, and are we going to work towards that? And in the other hand, there's so much of victims down there in north, south and the east and every part of the country, and are we ready to accommodate these people into the society? Are we ready to give back their land, which is still holding by the government institutions? Are we ready to compensation to these people, give some sort of a sorry, or maybe giving them some sort of a compensation, maybe some money, or acknowledge that we are going to heal all these issues and look forward for a reconciled society?
Thank you very much, Mr. Kirti Tennakoon. I now move on to Mr. Upul Jayasuriya for the final remarks of the day. The President addressing the UN General Assembly said that the past would be dealt honestly and will follow the process of truth-seeking. How must we deal with the past honestly? Your time starts now.
Dealing with the past honestly, I think I would like to quote the President Sirisena in a speech that he made in the Bar Association premises recently, where he said that everyone is talking about the good governance, that now we have restored the good governance. But the President, in his humility, he said, we have not restored the good governance. We have only opened the door towards good governance. And we have begun this journey towards that target. That's a humble statement. I think we must appreciate that. Now, with the effort that he made in creating the 19th A, with all the difficulties and the obstacles that he had from his own party members, finally he managed to survive and then bring something decent for the people of this country, and then restore in some form or the other the 17th Amendment that was voted for by the entire Parliament. Now that 19th A is there, the commissions, independent commissions, will have to be restored. The Public Service Commission, the Bribery Commission, the Election Commission, all these commissions have to be reappointed, and we have to begin this process where the confidence, the transparency, the value and the respect for the rule of law and the democratic values have to be brought back. So it is going through this process that what the President has said at the UN Assembly has to be taken into consideration.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jayasuriya. I leave it at that. Thank you very much, Dr. Saranamurthy, for joining us this evening, Ms. Tennakoon and Mr. Colonel Pereira, as well as Mr. Upul Jayasuriya for joining us this evening on Face the Nation. And thank you very much, Nadeem, Sonali, and also Faraz. Nice to have you on board, Faraz. I probably would see you next week, right? Thank you very much for joining us this evening. The next few months would be quite crucial for Sri Lanka, as all eyes would be on this tiny island nation. I leave you tonight with a quote. Education is a passport to the future, but tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you and good night.